I like an olive oil cake because it's a nice kind of neutral platform for a good seasonal fruit. I use it a lot in summer. It's really high in olive oil and it gives it a nice green, grassy, peppery flavor. It's good the next day as well, so you can bring it to a party. Hi, I'm Susana Querejazu. I'm from Lutie's restaurant. Today I'm in the MadeIN kitchen making a Texas olive oil cake with Bruleed stone fruit and Chantilly. We're gonna start with cracking our eggs into our bowl. I'm gonna grab my whisk. I'm just gonna kind of break these up a little bit. Once these eggs are broken up, I'm gonna kind of stream in our sugar. You really wanna get your eggs broken down. Sugar is a good vehicle to break down those protein strands. Once you're kind of emulsified here, I'm gonna set this aside. Now I'm going to add the orange zest and zest in a separate bowl so that we can hold some back for the finished plate up. Citrus adds a nice tang and depth to the olive oil cake, and it's really complementary of the grassy, peppery flavors that the olive oil brings to the cake. And you can always substitute your orange zest with grapefruit or lemon. I would say right now it's citrus season, so we're able to get Valencia oranges and blood oranges occasionally from Texas. And those are always preferred, but not always available. I'm gonna add the orange zest into the egg sugar mixture. You wanna make sure you get everything because that's so much flavor. Give it a nice whisk again. The texture and the consistency you're looking for from your egg sugar mixture is just nice and creamy. At this point, you're not really gonna over mix it. You can incorporate some air, but it's not super important that it's aerated. We're ready to stream in our oil, and I'm just gonna kind of start streaming it in and whisking as you're streaming your oil in. I like Texas olive oil because it has a really strong characteristic and flavor. It's really peppery and green tasting. And this cake is really nice because it's high in fat and it's very versatile. You're looking for a full emulsification into your eggs here. I'm gonna move on to mixing our dry ingredients together. I'm gonna set this aside and then pull a new one out. I'll start with my flour, baking soda, baking powder, and salt. Can give this a quick little whisk. So we're gonna set our dry ingredients aside again. We're gonna pull back our egg mixture, and then we're gonna begin sifting our flour into our egg mixture. Sifting is important. I like to sift my dry ingredients because it's a good insurance plan that you're not gonna get any flour clumps or any leavener clumps, which would be horrible to eat. Now that we have our dry ingredients in the bowl, we're gonna begin whisking this all together. I like to use a whisk for this because it's a really loose batter, and again, it's another insurance plan that you're not gonna have any clumps of flour. Right when this is incorporated, try not to overmix this, although this is a really wet batter. And now we're going to add our milk. Again, we're gonna stream this in. I like to use whole milk in all of my recipes because I want the full fat and the full flavor in there. I like to add this a little bit at a time, just until it's incorporated. Nice and smooth. Now that our batter is ready to go, we're gonna get ready to pour this in the pie dish. Because this is French porcelain, you don't have to grease it, but you can if you want to. I've preheated my oven to 375, and then right when this goes in, I'm gonna drop it down to 325. Now that our cake is in the oven, we're gonna start on our plums today. So I've got my MadeIN carbon steel pan preheating on a medium low. I like to use carbon steel because it's a good heat convector, nice and even, and also it's nonstick once it's seasoned. We're gonna start cutting our plums. I like to take the cheeks off of the plums, that way you don't have to cut the pit. So I'll start with the cheeks, and then you're kind of shooting for 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch here. I'm gonna lay these out on the sheet tray that I have. All right, so now that we've got our plums cut and laid out on the tray, I'm going to sprinkle sugar on both sides of the plums for a nice even brulee. So we'll hit one side and then I'll turn all of them over and then do the same thing to the other side. For this, I like to use an extra fine sugar, but granulated is fine too. Now that our plums are evenly coated in sugar, I'm going to move over to the carbon steel pan and glaze this with a little bit of butter. If your pan's a little hot, then just kind of kick down the heat and let it cool just a little bit. But the butter is fine if it browns. When you lay down your plums, you want to be pretty quick with it because you want the color of the sugar to turn all at the same time. Because there's butter in here, you just want to be really careful. There's no splashing, and because these are a little moist, there is going to be some splashing, so just be careful. So I'm going to stop once there's one layer of plums in here. You don't want to overcrowd your pan. You want a nice, even caramelization amongst the plums. This carbon steel is really nice because it retains a nice even heat, so it's good for caramelization. This should take about 2 minutes or until you see a nice caramelization on the pan side, and then you can just flip it over. And this is just the sugar caramelizing. And we're there. Now that we've got our plums bruleed, I'm gonna set this aside and start on our Chantilly. And Chantilly is just a French word for whipped cream. When you're whipping cream, you wanna just make sure you're using the coldest cream. You can even stick your bowl in the refrigerator if you wanna do that. And then also, I like to stream in my sugar for this as well. You can also do this in your mixer at home. You know, the best tip for a Chantilly and a whipped cream is just keeping everything as cold as possible. And that kind of just means you need to work fast as well. If your cream is taking a long time, or if it's starting to look separated, I would skip a beat and then put it back in the refrigerator for a moment. And then you can kind of start to grade your cream by a peak test, which is lifting your whisk up and seeing if it'll hold a peak. I like to take it to like a medium soft peak. Now that we've finished our Chantilly and our plums are bruleed, we will check on the cake. You'll know your olive oil cake is done when it's very nice and golden brown. You can also use a cake tester right in the middle of it, and when it comes out clean, you'll pull it out. And then move on to plating. We're gonna let this cool for probably about an hour and a half, and then unmold it from there. When you're pulling this out of the oven, you wanna make sure that the sides have kind of come off or shrinking up a little bit, and then you're looking for a nice deep golden brown color because of all the fat in the cake as well. So now that we have our cake out of the oven and cooled, this has been about an hour and a half, I'm gonna run an offset kind of along the edges just to make sure it's nice and loose. Now we're going to cut a piece of cake. I like to start kind of directly in the middle and then carry out your knife to the edge. You can go kind of slower along the edge because it has a tendency to break. It's a little bit drier on the edge. And then I'm gonna grab my offset and just kind of scoop it out of here. It's nice and golden brown in the middle because there's so much fat in there. Let's finish this. I'm gonna start with a dollop of our Chantilly. I like to put it kind of right on top and let it fall pretty naturally. A couple of slices of our bruleed plum, and then the orange zest that we set aside earlier. Gorgeous. Now it's time to take a bite. It's really good. The grassy, natural flavors of the cake contrast really well with the fresh, sweet cream, and the nice, almost bitterness that comes from the brulee of the plums is really nice, especially in summer, because you get a cold contrast and also just a nice earthy twist to a sweet dish. I'm Susana Querejazu from Lutie's Restaurant in Austin, Texas, in the MadeIN kitchen. And if you want to try this olive oil cake with Chantilly and stone fruit, click the link below.